A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
There's an exciting new podcast in Australia called Resilient Souls, and it's capturing the lives and the stories of people that have faced real hardship in their lives. And the founder of Resilient Souls, Stewart Bogle, has a story of his own, and he joins us now. Stewart, welcome.
Thanks so much, Andrew.
Stewart, podcasting has obviously just become a worldwide phenomenon, and many people download their information, their news, their entertainment. You know, there's so much, and I guess in the case of Christians, spiritual nourishment from podcasting. And so why did you start your podcast, Resilient Souls?
Well, it really goes back to a sense that God had put a story in my heart that he wanted me to get out there. And so for a long time, I'd been through many traumas and many difficult experiences. And so I felt a desire to write a book I called Learning to Dance in the Darkness. But every time I tried to sit down and write it, something new would come along and it would distract me and I'd have to deal with that. And so years and years later, I finally finished it. And that was just in the middle of COVID. And I was about to publish that. And then I had this real sense that, well, I really want to help people. But this is just my story. It's my perspective from my personality, my theology. So I began to get curious about how other people have gone through storms in life. So my book's called Learning to Dance in the Darkness because that's what I've been doing, is learning how to dance in the dark times, how to rejoice in the Lord always. And so I decided to ask other people, how have they done that? And so a curiosity led to me starting this podcast, and it's been life-giving, Andrew, just hearing others. It's confirmed some things that I already knew that would help people or not help people through the storm. But it also has taught me a whole lot about incredible people, or should I say ordinary people, who have got an incredible story.
Yeah, I love the title of your book, Learning to Dance in the Darkness. And it sounds like, and look, I've got to be honest, I have read your story, so I know your story, so I'm not going to pretend I don't. But obviously you wrote that book because you've faced some really significant challenges in your life. You have faced and stared down the darkness. Do you want to just give us, a brief version of that, Stewart?
Sure. So life was going really well in many ways. I was running a Bible school in a beautiful part of New South Wales, had young adults from all over the world coming, and it's where I got saved as an 18-year-old. So to go back there and serve on the team there was just incredible. So I was dreaming of the future. And one day, long story short, my wife walked through the door and I saw a look on her face that told me that she had cancer. She'd been to check out a lump that we'd been worried about for a year, and the doctor kept saying, don't worry about it, it's a lump from breastfeeding, it's fine. But this time she went and the doctor said, no, it's really serious. So at that time, I'm running a Bible college, I'm preaching and speaking all over the place, and I was really wrestling with how could this happen? And we were hoping for the miracle. And this battle went on for a few years. We had to give up the role there, we had to return back to Adelaide. The hospitals were too far away in New South Wales, and we were travelling too much and needed to be around family. So we went on a 3.5-year battle, and unfortunately she went to be with the Lord, and I was left with 3 young children. And so single dad, 3 young children. I wasn't able to work, and I was lining up at Centrelink, and my world had completely changed. And, I think somewhere in the back of my mind I thought, well, I'll be faithful. I've been faithful to God, cared for my wife. I'm there for my children. And God will reward me. And from that point on, not even sure where I got that idea from, but from that point on, I went through a series of incredible challenges. It was a few years later, I remarried, thinking that was going to be the answer to all of my pain and suffering. And that was an incredibly difficult journey too. I won't go into detail there because I don't think that's my story to share, other than it was really hard. And where I was seen, I think, as a fairly noble guy, the way I cared for my wife, in this instance, I think people made some judgments about me, and that led to my reputation being damaged, and I was no longer being invited to speak anywhere or to share anywhere, and people didn't know what had gone on. But that was incredibly hard. And again, I caught my breath and thought, things will improve from now. I've been faithful again, loved as best I could. And then I just went through a series of what in some ways I laugh because it could be called a series of unfortunate events. We had my son, who's just a standout young man, just loves Jesus, just incredible young guy, was trying to romance his now wife, but it was just a Valentine's Day thing he did on the hills overlooking Adelaide. and a little bit of oil from the pan splashed into a flame, and he lit up the entire hills over Adelaide. And at that time, they had passed a law saying if you start a bushfire, you're going to jail. So we faced 12 months in and out of court. People seeing us on the news and thinking, here we go, an arsonist here, and look at this story. So I was just completely broken, going, how are we going to deal with this? Now, fortunately, he was exonerated, and they passed, they allowed the white paper the incident, and he was allowed to be let go because they all realised that it was just an error. And so during this time, I was diagnosed with cancer myself, and had the battle with cancer, and didn't really know how to deal with that because I knew what my wife had gone through. So I had surgery, and they thought that was all going to clear everything up. And 3 months later, they said they didn't get it, and it had spread. So now I'm battling with what they say is potentially life-threatening now, and they had to do some pretty serious therapy to try to deal with that. So I'm trying to deal with that, deal with the loss of the marriage, deal with the reputational damage, deal with so many things going on, thinking there's going to be some relief at some point, Andrew.
But can we just stop there, Stuart? So let me just ask, how old were you when your first wife passed away?
I was 39.
And how old was she? Around the same age or a bit younger than you?
She was the same age, 39. She'd battled the cancer for 3.5 years.
Man, and she'd obviously been a faithful Christian her whole life.
Oh, she was amazing. She was just the most incredible person, and just had a remarkable way of facing the storm. She didn't go into a panic. She didn't try to do bargains with God. She just trusted him. She prayed. She worked through the pain and the loss, but she kept doing what she'd always done. She read the Bible. She listened to great messages and great music. She was kind and giving, and so it was. I'm not sure I could say that anybody could handle a storm like she faced better.
Yeah, and then, so I'm guessing, like you said, you're a youngish dad with 3 small kids, and you probably always thought, if I can get remarried, I can bring some stability back to my life, my kids' life, there'll be a family unit again. And looking back, Stuart, do you think you maybe weren't ready to remarry and you just maybe jumped in too quick, or you just weren't in a place to make a really good choice? Like, do you have much of reflection on that?
Yeah, I've had lots of time to reflect on that. I'm not sure there's an easy answer to that question, or many of the questions you might ask. It had been four and a bit years. I hadn't even been out on a date with another woman. I was pretty content on my own, doing my thing. So it wasn't like I rushed like I think a lot of people do because they're lonely. I'd pretty well come to terms with the fact I was on my own. So I did have my legs taken out from under me and fell in love really quickly. But I probably wasn't wise, didn't really read all the signs or even realise how complex the environment I was asking this beautiful young woman to come into. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of things I can reflect back, but, I don't think it serves well to spend too much time on, why did that happen? What could I have done differently? It happened. Yeah.
I'm only asking because of our listeners, that who may be in a similar situation to you. If there's anything that you can take away from that, they can take away from that. So obviously, that marriage ended after a couple of years, and then your son. So you really have faced some darkness in your life, haven't you?
Yeah, still a couple of chapters to go too, but it has been not at all what I'd expected. I actually opened up my book with a line saying, "This isn't the life I expected to live, but it's the life I've been given." So, I had to really, the subtitle of the book is Wrestling with God in the Darkest of Times, because it was a wrestle. It was trying to work out, why was this relentless suffering happening? It was only a year ago, Andrew, that my daughter, who went through all of this with me, beautiful young woman, married a childhood sweetheart, and he died 3 months after they had their public wedding. They got married during COVID, where only 5 of us could go, and a year later they had their public wedding, and so I'm speaking at their wedding, and then 3 months later I'm speaking at the funeral because he died of cancer as well. So there's been this relentless series of challenges that has, really, really impacted us, and I wanted to do something with my book. Look, to be honest, Andrew, I think the book started off when I first wrote it 10 years ago as a triumphal series of messages around how you get through the storm and put a tango in the darkness. But since I've been through so many other things subsequently, I think it's humbled me a lot and made me realise that what people need is not some polished message of everything's going to work out if you get enough people praying, or if you do this or you do that. It's a real and honest story of how do you keep your eyes on God through the storm, and more so, how do you keep your eyes on God through multiple storms, because they just kept coming.
Yeah, man. Wow. I mean, that's really, really intense what you've been through, Stewart. Can I ask, in the Bible, who do you identify most? Like, we all identify with characters in the Bible. I think as a new Christian, we like to identify with the apostles, preaching and healing the sick and being, used by God. But now that you're a little bit older and wiser, and you've been through some of these challenges, who do you really identify with in the scriptures?
Yeah, I'd probably say two characters. One is Paul, because the message of Paul in Philippians 4, verses 4 to 6, it speaks to me about how do you face the darkness and continue to trust God, and how do you rejoice in the Lord always without that being happiness and smiles and pretending. Here's a guy in jail. Here's a guy that didn't get what he was hoping for in so many ways, but he was using his life to still say, trust Jesus no matter what. And the other character is Joseph. I just love the story of Joseph. I used to do a lot of teaching through Joseph, how if you look at how his story, he looks back and sees the hand of God woven through everything. And so he doesn't blame God. He doesn't try to work it all out. He just faithfully goes, and he forgives in the end people that have wronged him. He explains to them that they meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. So I love both of those characters.
Yeah, awesome, mate. And obviously in your Dancing in the Dark, the scriptures were a big part of you just keeping strong and staying solid?
Yeah, they were. I'd be honest and say that I find that often you go to the scriptures for comfort and you don't always find it. Sometimes it's like reading something in a foreign language, but there are little glimpses I got. I'd go to the Psalms and I'd find there's permission to feel down and struggle. You'd see some of the stuff around lament me as well, that I wasn't alone. But it was that passage, I think, in Philippians 4, which says, rejoice in the Lord always, and then goes into a very practical couple of verses about how God gives a peace that guards our hearts and our minds. That really spoke to me. So, I kept going to the Word and I kept going to God, but it wasn't always easy. And while it sounds easy, you open the Bible and you get comfort, it wasn't like that. It was a wrestle.
Yeah, wow. Well, you're obviously really well qualified to have a podcast called Resilient Souls, and you've written a book called Dancing in the Darkness. Is that the name of it again? Dancing in the Darkness?
No, it's actually Learning to Dance in the Darkness. A couple of people have said, look, I think you should shorten it to Dancing in the Darkness. And I said, that has a sense of completion to it, that I've worked it out, but I'm still learning to dance in the darkness, and I've got to remind myself often that this is a journey, not a destination.
Well, to all of our listeners today, I would encourage you to check out this podcast. It's called Resilient Souls, and you can check out more about Stewart Bogle and his story on resilientsouls.com.au. That's resilientsouls.com.au. I'm sure there's a link or something on there that can enable people to purchase the book, Learning to Dance in the Darkness. And also check out his podcast, because there's some real stories on there from real people who face some real challenges. And I think the older and more wiser we all get, we face challenges. We realize that this Christian life is not just a pathway with rose petals on and music and dancing and singing and chocolate rivers and candy mushrooms we can all just eat, but there's some real challenges we all face. And Stewart, I want to thank you for joining us today on 2020. I want to thank you so much for your honesty and your transparency, because I know your story is going to really give hope to a lot of people today.
Oh, that's my hope as well. So thanks for having me, Andrew, and thanks to the listeners for listening to me share a bit of my story.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.